So let me talk a little bit about what we're doing here today. So New Bedford, more than anything else, is known as a seaport city, and we have a successful port in so many dimensions. Commercial fishing, of course, we're #1 in the United States. We have a growing cargo sector. We've positioned ourselves to become a leader in the offshore wind industry. Recreational boating, by any measure, has been growing very rapidly, and we strongly believe, I strongly believe, that there's plenty of growth ahead, that New Bedford can grow in all these industries and more if we plan well, if we make the right decisions now and follow through on our plans. We can set the city up well, the region up well, for really, by no exaggeration, the next 100 years. And so this careful planning requires many voices, and what we've been doing over the last year has been working very hard, funded by a federal grant in part and also by city money, to take a look at our whole waterfront, figure out what needs to go where the puzzle pieces are best fit, and to come up, we hope in the next few months, with a plan for the next few decades for our waterfront, one that will enable us to attract investment and grow jobs and continue this port's role as the economic driver of all of Greater New Bedford and beyond. Using the grant funds and using funds from the city, and we hired Sasaki, one of the premier planning firms in the world that has done waterfront work in, among other places, Shanghai and New York and many other cities. We believe that through their efforts, and with their efforts, and with the efforts of our team here, which is comprised of waterfront stakeholders, primarily from the commercial fishing industry, but many other industries on the waterfront, that we'll get collectively the best answers. And we have the best effort put into this planning process now. And one of the things that we're trying to do as part of this effort is to focus on the central waterfront. We need, I think, the summer concerts that we've seen recently, the growth of some of the restaurants and the desire to get down the waterfront by many folks, tourists and others alike, have all signaled that that part of the waterfront should become part of the downtown. Now, how does that happen? Well, that raises many other questions, but that's why we're planning right now. We need a central waterfront that can be a hallmark of the city, that can accentuate existing industries, and that can also bring people down to the water so that people appreciate what the waterfront offers, and for people to enjoy themselves in one of the greatest harbors in America. So that's what we've been doing through the hard work of Ed Washburn, port director, who's here. He's been heading up the planning effort. I'll ask Ed to come up and say a couple of words. Derek Santos, our economic development director, as well as who's here as well as Bob Culver, the former director of mass development, who is now the principal for Sasaki, that has been working on the waterfront plan, who's been involved in many planning projects on our waterfront in the last few years. When I say the central waterfront, I mean particularly that stretch of waterfront that goes from Pier 3 all the way to the south to the NSTAR site, which is, until recently, of course, was the site of a proposed casino development, which is, as we all know, is not going to happen. And as I said at the time when the casino deal fell apart, that New Bedford wasn't flat-footed. And the reason we weren't flat-footed is that we've been undertaking this planning effort for a year now, and we're focusing particularly on those two sites. So I'm really pleased with the effort here. Folks really dug in and offered up some great ideas. And in the next few months, we hope that what will emerge is at least a set of guiding principles for the development of the Central Harbor in the years ahead. We've been, the planning team that's been in place for the last few months has been augmented. I've invited in a number of folks, including Peter Mead, the former director of the Boston Redevelopment Authority, who's here, as well as Jeff Mullen, the state's former transportation secretary, as well as many others. Bob Unger, the former editor of the Standard Times, who have weighed in and who have already made substantial contributions to the effort. So with all that, I'm going to call Ed Washburn up just to talk a little bit about the process, and then I'll call Bob Culver up.
Thank you, Mayor.
Up to the podium, Ed.
So
Such as it is.
we started this process in October of 2014, and the idea is really the entire harbor is its own. It's a very big place. It's got a lot of diverse industries going on, a lot of diverse activities going on. And if you're ever going to try to get a close look at what's going on in one parcel, you will lose it if you don't take a look at the rest of the harbor. So the idea of the entire waterfront land use plan is really to get an idea of how the entity, the port as a whole, is working together and how all of those industries are related with each other. And that gives you a much better view of what goes on on a certain parcel. So we've been doing this plan. The vast majority of the plan has been doing outreach to all of the different stakeholders that are currently here in the harbor, in the fishing industry especially, but also in the cargo industry, in the recreational boating industry, find out what they're doing now and what they need to do to expand and do a lot of the job creation in the future. So that's all sort of culminated with some of really exciting ideas that are coming out, and they're still coming out with brainstorming sessions like we just had. But it's it's really interesting to especially someone that I work in the harbor every day, and it's amazing how much you only see at the surface. And when you go into these fish houses and these recreational boating places, there's a lot going on, and how we can, as a port, better help the industries that are currently here, and help attract new industries that can complement the industries that are here is really the key of this plan. So.
All right, thanks, Ed.
Thanks.
Let me just have Bob come up and offer a comment, and then we'll take some questions.
Hi, I think there's three things that I can add, and that is that I've been working in various capacities in New Bedford for, I don't know, it's got to be probably the last decade. And what we're now involved with, I describe as meaningful participation, meaningful planning, and I think the strong anticipation of meaningful outcomes of this framework master plan. And the framework master plan is called Framework because it's designed to frame the various areas, physical areas of the port, in terms of what they would best be used for to deal with everything from recreation to jobs, and do that in a way that involves public participation, feedback, and then finally voting on the extent to which everyone likes the plan going forward and causes it to be actionable. And that's kind of what we've been up to.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And just pick up, just before I take questions, I just wanted to pick up on Bob's last point, that is the actionability of the plan. This is not the first time that New Bedford has done waterfront planning. It's not the first time it's done planning in the last 20 years. We've done waterfront planning before. What's important now is that we have broad stakeholder input, and we've had great input in these sessions over the last year. There will be ample opportunity for public input because we really need, once there is a concept put out there, we need broad public input so we have the benefit of the best ideas from folks who live in the city, and even people who might not live in the city but actually work here. And then once we build a consensus around the kind of waterfront, the kind of port we want, we've got to act on it. We can't sit back and just let this collect, like the plan collect dust on a shelf. It has to be moved forward. There has to be forward motion here. None of this is going to play out in the next year. This isn't an overnight exercise. This is a multi-year endeavor, but it has to be set in motion, and that requires some determination, that requires follow-through, and that's what people can expect of my administration and the folks that we work here with, who are in the room and who were in the room just a few moments ago. So with all that, tell me your questions. Mike.
Are they open to you? Well, start with you first. You spoke in there about how a key part of the discussion will be water-related uses versus non-water related. You said you didn't want to put your thumb too heavily on the scale, but you felt like uses on the waterfront and the central waterfront should be water related. Talk a little bit about and what could that rule out? What would that mean? And your thoughts on that issue?
Well, so we have a limited amount of water-facing land in the harbor. Our harbor is a substantial harbor, but it's not a huge harbor. It's not the same size as, say, a Boston harbor. It's not the same size as Baltimore, New York, the major American harbors. So what that means is that we can't waste space, bulkhead space on the water for things that could be located somewhere else. So what that means in general is that something like a courthouse, to take one example that was used, is probably not, would be a fine idea in other places that have ample waterfront land, but probably not something that would work well here. There are plenty of other places in the downtown where that would work well. Boston has the space for something like that. New Bedford doesn't. That's the point around water dependency. We need, we've got this resource, and it should be used by those enterprises that need the resource and can gain a competitive advantage from that resource.
So, this has been going on since the beginning of this year, roughly. So you had the mindset that there could be a casino where NSTAR is.
Right.
How has the pullout from KG changed the way that you and the stakeholders are looking at that piece of land? Because Sprague still owns it, and they weren't here today, but Ed, you mentioned you're meeting with them next month. So how is the city going after that location?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the map, but that site had been sort of reserved in the planning process for that specific development. Now that development is not going to happen, so the question is, all right, what now? And the what now is, it could be any number of things. I see that site as the transition point from the downtown to the industrial area to the south. So that means that it doesn't necessarily have to be limited to one use. And there are a number of variables in play, including how much it would cost to clean it up at different points on the property. Industrial uses require less expensive cleanup because the regulations require a lower standard. So, so that's really the framework for looking at that property. Ideally, again, if it's on the water, we want to have a water-related use at the site. Go ahead, Mike.
Ed, do you mind?
Sure.
Two real quick. One is the mayor just called you the port director. Are you still acting, or has there been a hire that we don't know about yet?
All right, he's still out. You wanted to demote him publicly like that.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify. I wanted to congratulate him.
Oh, okay. That's.
Thanks, Mike.
I have to hold on to that Hallmark card. Right.
One of the ideas in there, which is new and I thought compelling, maybe was moving the fish auction onto State Pier and carving out part of State Pier for a possible wide range of uses, retail, even a public venue, a upper story over the fish auction, I mean all that kind of stuff. Is that feasible in your mind? And then what are your thoughts on that concept of that kind of larger public use of State Pier?
So I think one of the great strengths of the port is obviously the commercial fishing industry, and I think the mayor made a great point. Is if you can get more people in front of the fishing industry and learning about it, it benefits our fishermen, it benefits our fish processors, and it really benefits New Bedford as a whole. And the brand of New Bedford, not just with scallops, not just scallops benefiting from the branding, but New Bedford as a whole benefiting from the branding. And one of the things that I field almost on a weekly basis are people that want to go see the auction or go see the fishing industry in some form. You know, if they can watch the offloading, that's part of it. But you know, just learning, you know, especially in the last 10 years with a lot of the reality shows like Deadliest Catch and things like that, people are focused and interested in the commercial fishing industry. So I think it would certainly benefit having somewhere in the central waterfront a fish auction or fish offloading where people can learn about the regulations, they can learn about, you know, what they're eating, they can learn about how it was harvested, and they can learn about, you know, New Bedford fish is the freshest fish, and it's the last wild protein. So there's a lot of opportunities by bringing that asset from an industrial area to a more mixed use area. And you know, there's a lot of questions that still have to be answered about how to do it in a safe way that benefits both the public and the commercial fishing industry. So that's the key.
Is it fair to say right now, I mean, and it's my fault because I've never gone, where the fish auction is now, is it open to public access? I mean, it's kind of hidden away back there in the bulkhead, like.
Yeah. So it's not open. I mean, if you go in there, Richie will show you around.
Yeah.
But it's not. There's no formal. You know, there's no formal way to get in and see. You know, and it's a very open area, and they're willing to show you around, and there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think the industry would benefit from, and the city as a whole would benefit from.
Yeah, you see these open air fish markets and other fishing related activity and retail on waterfronts all over the world, and oftentimes in ports that are pale in significance to New Bedford. And you know, Pike's Market in Seattle. Seattle's not that big of a fishing port, and Pike's Market's not on the waterfront, but it's got it's world renowned for, you know, guys throwing fish across the counter to patrons or to other employees, and it's become part of Seattle's identity. Well, if there's any place on the planet where you'd expect to see something like that, it would be right here in New Bedford. So I think there's a lot to be said for having something like that. There's an awful lot of details to work out before we start down that road, but having something that features commercial fishing and work on the sea, which is so central to the city's identity, is, to my mind, it could be a very important feature of what happens next on the central waterfront. All right.
Mayor, can I just make one?
Go ahead.
just a
Absolutely, Bob.
Process comment?
Yep.
That.
Process comment.
Yeah. As the planner in this, and I want to keep the attention of you guys actually in this, as the planner in this, you have gotten information here from individuals. And I believe, in fact, I know that the mayor is very proud of the fact that there's a public process going on right now. And that while you've got ideas from this, a whole group of people feel that they are empowered to still come forward with ideas and represent those. So let's not forget that. And at this point in time, the plan has not been formally put together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
A lot of people
none of this
put- lot of
in
people
other words,
put a
none of
lot
this
of
stuff
work.
is set in stone. There's a lot of work that's
A lot
been
of
done. A
people
lot of
do a
work
lot
that
of
will
work
be done.
on this.
Yeah.
That's very clear.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.